After the Middle Ages, Europe underwent great intellectual, cultural, economic, and religious changes during the Renaissance. The Renaissance encompasses many different revolutions that were happening simultaneously. The Reformation, the Scientific Revolution, the Age of Exploration, and the Enlightenment. By 1500, the intellectual, cultural, economic, and religious changes of the Renaissance had taken root in Europe. This resulted in political changes. Prior to the Renaissance, Europe had decentralized government in the form of feudalism. As a result of all the changes in the Renaissance, Europe's government became increasingly more centralized. This centralization reached its extreme under a form of government called absolutism. Absolutism is when the ultimate authority of the state is in the hand of one monarch, meaning the king is in charge of everything. He makes all decisions about the state both in terms of domestic and foreign policy. He creates law, determines how much money is spent, and determines the religious beliefs of a country. He legitimizes his power through the concept of divine right. From our modern democratic perspective, this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. We are wary of the power of the state being in the hands of one person. This leads us to ask the question, why absolutism? What was happening in Europe at this time that made this a logical choice for a system of government? Why would Europe want to take the power from being in the hands of the many to putting it in the hands of the few? There are several reasons why Europeans turned to absolutism from 1500 to 1800. These reasons can be categorized under the acronym PERSIA, which we have been using for analysis all year long. The reasons Europeans turned to absolutism primarily fall under economic, religious, political, and social reasons. First, we will look at the economic reasons why Europeans turned to absolutism. As you remember from the Renaissance unit, the intellectual innovations in navigations and shipbuilding of the Renaissance allowed Europeans to begin exploring the world around them. This is also influenced by Europeans' belief in humanism, or man's ability to achieve great things through individual accomplishment and ingenuity. Many different European explorers traveled to the Americas. Despite the fact that many advanced civilizations were already living in the Americas, Europeans' belief in their cultural superiority led many conflicts between Europeans and indigenous peoples. Europeans won these conflicts and stole the wealth of the indigenous people. The conquistadors took this wealth back to Europe. The large influx of gold and silver into Europe from the Americas was great for the people in power. They got richer. However, for the common people, the massive increase in money in the economy caused inflation. The price of everyday items and food rose. People could not afford to buy what they needed to survive. What are you like when you haven't had enough to eat? How do you feel in class when you're waiting for third lunch to start? As you can imagine, many of the common people in Europe became restless and unsettled. They wanted changes that would bring stability to the marketplace so they could afford to buy bread again. For reason number 2, we'll look at religious changes. As you remember from the Renaissance unit, great changes happened to the Christian religion during the Reformation. Martin Luther wrote the 95 Theses challenging the practices of the Catholic Church and starting the Protestant Reformation. This meant that Europe was no longer unified religiously. Instead of everyone being Catholic, individuals could be Catholic, Lutheran, Anglican, Calvinist, Anabaptist, or my personal favorite, Zwinglian. While Europe became increasingly secular during the Renaissance, religion still played an important role in daily life. All of the different religious beliefs led to many religious conflicts. These conflicts were often not just friendly wars of words. Religious conflicts between Catholics and Protestants led to civil war, violence, and death. As you can imagine, at this point, Europeans were now both hungry and uncertain of how to worship God. This leads us to our third reason, related to politics. What would you do when you are a common person who is hungry and scared? You turn to your government to ask for help. However, at this time in Europe, there was no one central government. As a result of feudalism, many different towns and provinces existed with different nobles in power. Many of these nobles spent most of their time fighting with other nobles for power and control of different areas. Think of how you fight with your brother or sister just because they are sitting so close to you. Time was not spent focusing on the issues of the people, and chaos was added to the already hectic climate because of the power squabbles between different nobles over land and power. This all culminated into our final reason, dealing with what was happening socially at this time in Europe. What do when you're hungry, your neighbor is a member of a rival religious faction, and your local noble is too worried about his own money to help you? You burn a witch. Yes, I said it, you burn a witch. Using a scapegoat, often in the form of a witch, is a favorite European pastime. When things get bad and there are no solutions, people look for an easy scapegoat. Over 100,000 people were persecuted for witchcraft during this time period in Europe. As you can imagine, it didn't actually help anything. It just made things worse. Since witches aren't real, sorry to all you Harry Potter fans, wizards aren't real either. There is no way to prove if someone is a witch or not. This led to more chaos and instability to an already chaotic situation. By now, you understand that Europeans turned to absolute monarchs at this time in history because of the economic, religious, political, and social changes that happened in Europe as a result of the Renaissance. Absolute monarchs, with their absolute authority, were able to swoop in and fix some of the economic, religious, political, and social instability of this time period. Europeans were willing to give up their control in government in exchange for the stability an absolute ruler could offer.